Hello, I am Emma Brown Shackley. It is Monday, May 11th, 2020, and I'm coming to you from Steuben County in western New York. As a gerontology major, I learn how choices and circumstances accumulate throughout a person's life course and how the course of their life is affected by these things. This semester at Ithaca College, the sections on developmental diversity in your life in our textbook, Development Across a Lifespan by Robert S. Feldman, illuminated the developmental outcomes influenced by differences in culture, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and other factors that make us diverse. Since I left Ithaca in March 2020 to be closer to my hometown community during the COVID-19 pandemic, I've been doing some work in our community to coordinate resources. This started with lots of research in a short amount of time. Research on how to get groceries safely and how to deliver groceries safely to people who are most vulnerable to this disease. But I saw more concerning issues around the bend. You see, I'm from a rural area, and rural areas are historically underserved and underrepresented. We have a lot of potential economic opportunities, but we haven't necessarily turned those into kinetic energy yet. Additionally, rural areas tend to have poor internet connection, and overnight, as you know, much of our work world went online. As the child of dairy farmers, I wondered what would happen if a milk truck driver got sick or a plant had to socially distance to keep their employees safe. What would happen when restaurants closed and milk retailers lost those orders, those wholesale orders? How would that affect our retail supply? What would happen to the milk that wasn't being processed? Without migrant labor being able to enter the country because of travel restrictions due to the virus, how would the crops be harvested? Unemployment rates rose, and so did food insecurity. At the same time, perfectly good food is being destroyed because our food system is held together with such fragility. I researched food hubs and low-income communities. Then I saw that Rochester and Ithaca are jumping on this idea. I hope to see the same in our area, in the southern tier of western New York. So what does any of this have to do with developmental psychology, you may be asking? Well, despite all our technological advances, humans haven't figured out how to live without food yet, and our access to food affects our physical and psychological development from birth until death. Our textbook talked about the importance of prenatal nutrition, nutrition in our preschool years, nutrition as adults, and how changes in our senses and social interactions can affect nutrition for older adults. Feeding America is an organization that coordinates with food pantries around the United States, and they reported in 2018 that 1 out of 6 children were living in food insecurity, and 85% of counties that were food insecure were rural counties. How many of my classmates, I wondered, grew up with food insecurity? How many of them didn't have a reliable source of food throughout their childhood and adolescence? How did it affect their ability to focus and reason? And how does that ability influence their involvement in their community and their local, state, and federal government? Feeding America estimates that 1 in 4 children could face hunger during the pandemic. 25% of children could face hunger during the pandemic. How will this influence their education? And more importantly, how will this influence their physical and psychological or cognitive development? The 2012 Africa Human Development Report identified the 3 critical links in the chain of food security: availability, access, and use. Right now, there is lots of food available, but people are unable to access it. If they can access it, sometimes they do not have the tools to use it. This report provides evidence that interruption in food supplies can be especially damaging to young children, because even short spells of undernutrition at a young age can cause lifelong disabilities. And having enough food to fill your tummy isn't enough. If a person consumes a diet high in calories and low in nutrients, they can suffer micronutrient deficiencies. At the same time, they can be obese. Excessive weight in children is associated with physical and psychological health problems, and malnutrition leaves people more susceptible to infections and slows or prevents recovery, which is especially concerning during a pandemic, and it thereby reduces productivity and increases spending on health care. All of that from malnutrition. 4 micronutrients that are vital for good nutrition and human development are vitamin A, iron, iodine, and zinc. Now, vitamin A you can get from orange and yellow fruits and veggies and dark green vegetables. You can get iron from lentils and spinach. You can get iodine from fish, seaweed, dairy products, and grains, and zinc from seeds, nuts, legumes, and meat. But you got to remember that the food you eat is only as good as the ground it was grown upon, so the land has to have those nutrients in it to begin with. The 2012 Africa Human Development Report states that vitamin A deficiency is a leading cause of preventable blindness in children, and it increases the risk of severe infections that lead to disease and death. Iron deficiency contributes to the deaths of young women during pregnancy and childbirth, and it's the leading cause of anemia. Iron deficiency can cause mental retardation in developing fetuses. My primary work in our community recently has focused mostly on food pantries because they serve the most vulnerable among us. Because without food, we don't have health. People with adequate resources can still access food locally or at box stores, though they might have to compromise on quantity or brand. They have the means to pay for goods, and perhaps they have the means to have them delivered. But people living in food security sometimes lack the resources to make the most nutritious choices, the choices that are most beneficial to their health. The 2012 Africa Human Development Report provided evidence from both developing and developed countries that children's nutrition is influenced by the education of their parents, especially their mothers. Educated mothers who are better informed about caring for their children are more likely to allocate their scarce household resources to nutrition and health care. The 2012 Africa Human Development Report also illuminates that breakdowns in food systems can push millions into poverty, trigger violence and unrest, and alter farming patterns, which can have harmful consequences for food production. Those events could present a whole new onslaught of trauma for people throughout their life course, and depending on their resilience, that trauma could affect their development. Some folks never learned how to prepare fresh foods for a meal, so an educational component is sometimes necessary to empower people to have more healthy eating habits on a very limited budget. Moreover, some food pantries have very little fresh food because they lack adequate refrigeration or they lack donations of these items. We are working with local organizations, businesses, and individuals to identify existing resources, identify existing and potential needs, and then develop a strategy to meet these needs and minimize waste of perfectly useful and necessary goods. By the way, our landfill is full, so I question when anyone is throwing out something useful. After all, the 3 necessary components of food security are availability, access, and use. We're trying to build the plane while we're flying it, but at least Systemic issues are being addressed because people who are accustomed to having what they want when they want it are awakening to a reality of scarcity that others have known for a long time. We owe it to our children and the meek around the world to make the most necessary components of life available, accessible, and usable. Their development and our development as nations depend on it. Thank you. Stay safe out there.